Hello everybody, Ben Rogers here, the Raptors Digest. Riker, a controversial thing over the past couple weeks has been the talk of the NBA trade deadline. You know, the Toronto Raptors obviously made a couple moves. They brought in Jeremy Lin, and they obviously, you saw the title of the video, they traded for Marc Gasol, trading fan favorite Jonas Valanciunas, DeLon Wright, and CJ Miles to Memphis, bringing in Gasol, who has been kind of confusing to watch because you look at his box scores each and every game, they've been very underwhelming, but you look at the eye test, you look at how the team has been performing with him in the lineup, you know, top in the league in defense, top of the league, you know, the field goal percentage, the three-point percentage, all that has increased while he's on the team, while he's playing, and, you know, the team looks better, but his individual performance is going very poorly, and people are questioning whether this was the right trade to do. So, Riker, you were initially skeptical on this trade, and inevitably you came around to, you know, thinking it was the right move to do. What are your thoughts on the trade right now?
Right. Okay. So it's a tale of two cities, right? J. Cole. Obviously, if you look at the team performance overall, that's the real reason this trade makes sense.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned it. We couldn't find the exact stats. We found them somewhere. Lost them again, but the three-point shooting percentage has increased now to among the top in the league since the trade. They went from, we do have the stats for assists, they went from 22nd in the league in assists, team assists, to third place behind Denver and surprisingly Washington. So overall, and then defensive ability has gone up. And then you do need to factor in and consider, again, time with the team, chemistry, all these things, and injuries, of course. So overall, team performance has gotten better. But that's to look at what you actually got in return. Marc Gasol, stats-wise, and looking at what he's giving out on the court, besides assisting, right? Besides his facilitating, because he's really a big point guard. In certain ways, because the offense can flow through him. Jonas Valanciunas has been absolutely a shining star since he left the team. So if you just look at individual performances, team factors completely discluded, it looks like you sort of lost a real diamond in the rough. But that's what we're going to talk about here now.
Yeah, certainly. Jonas Valanciunas has been absolutely impressive for the Memphis Grizzlies. He's currently averaging for the Grizzlies 19.9 points per game, 11 rebounds, absolutely monstrous numbers in the 19 games he's played. Obviously, he's going to be out with injury for the rest of the season now, but you know he probably would have played if it wasn't the Memphis Grizzlies weren't tanking and all of that. But in the games he's played for Memphis, he's completely stepped up his game. People have been waiting for Jonas Valanciunas to break out and be the player that he kind of has shown down in Memphis, and he showed in spurts for Toronto Raptors over the past couple seasons. But Riker, this wasn't going to happen on this Toronto Raptors roster.
It couldn't happen because, Ben, it literally couldn't happen. And we had a lot of angst last season towards Dwayne Casey and the coaching staff for not playing him, through not feeding it to him down low. And what happens? He goes to Toronto. In the first game, he takes 19 field goal attempts. Second game, he takes 15 field goal attempts. On his entire season, this season with the Toronto Raptors, he did not take as many shots in any one particular game. In his first two games on Memphis, he goes out and he now scores. He had, in the season with Toronto, he had 2 games where he was over 19 points. And now, since being on Memphis, he's had 13 games, 20-plus points, 2 in the 30-point range. So it's a product of them recognizing what kind of player he is. Obviously, the team is not as talented, so they're going to have time to be able to go to him more. But we knew Jonas was a guy that he has potential, he has skill in the league, and he's really now being able to flourish, but that wouldn't have happened, like you said, on the Toronto Raptors. There's just no way, with the balance of the players that they have, that he would have been able to take as many shots per game.
Certainly. His shots went from being on the Toronto Raptors, he shot about 8.6 field goal attempts per game. In Memphis, he's shooting close to 15. That's nearly double. You know, Jonas Valanciunas, the more you give him touches, the more he's going to score. That's how it goes. He's been remarkably efficient in his time with Toronto, and those are all great things. The scoring and the rebounding weren't the issues with Jonas Valanciunas. The issues were coming on his ability to play pick-and-roll defense and his ability to consistently stretch the floor and, you know, be able to create and play within the flow of an offense. Because we've seen it. When Jonas Valanciunas gets the ball, everything kind of slows down, and during playoff time, right? When he's down the block, he's not very good at passing outside the post, right? Teams kind of come out and double him, and he can't really do much except make a straight line, just complete outlet, and completely slow down, initiate the offense, right? His game isn't within the flow of talented players around him. That's not where he necessarily thrives. So offensively, he's not making people worse, but he doesn't make people better. And defensively, we talked about it so much, especially at the beginning of the year. There was so many plays. It was classic for Jonas Valanciunas in the pick and roll defense to just completely sag off in the paint and give up completely open shots. We saw it in the Wizards series last year. Bradley Beal, how many open mid-rangers did he give up to Bradley Beal and John Wall in that series? LeBron James, they completely feasted them in the pick and roll in the past 2-3 seasons when Jonas Valanciunas was on the court. And now with this Toronto Raptors team, because we also gave up Jonas, DeLon, and CJ Miles. Obviously, DeLon's a very good defender, but giving up CJ and Jonas, there are no defensive liabilities on this roster. In the playoffs, there are no holes that you can attack in our rotation, and that's going to be extremely valuable because there's no one you have to hide on this team anymore.
No, that's a really good point to bring up, and it's not something this is part of the eye test, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the defense, there's not a lot of metrics that you can really pick out on the stat sheet that would be a fantastic indication of what the improvement is, except for net defensive rating, team defensive rating, things like that. But if you do watch Marc Gasol play, even though he's not an upgrade in athleticism or length or anything like that, one of the biggest concerns or the biggest challenges of having Jonas Valanciunas on your or in the lineup that's on the court, especially come clutch time, late minutes, is exactly like you said. He's a good free throw shooter,
Mm-hmm.
so he's not really a liability on offense.
Yeah.
Exactly, but defense, even though he knows to come up and he knows to hedge screens sometimes and come up, on the switches, he's basically useless. He's not able to be mobile, and I don't think that he really understands how to play in the middle of the paint, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the middle of the key. That's what Marc Gasol, in the few games that he's played on the Toronto Raptors thus far, I see him do a really good job of. He understands his lack of athleticism.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He's not that he can't run up and down the court, but his spacing on defense is fantastic because he can really rotate well without having to actually run from position to position, and that's a big thing that can't be underrated with Marc Gasol.
Certainly, and his ability to just make reads on help side defense. He's not blocking shots, but he's getting the way. He's not gonna be a player like Serge Ibaka that gets up there and gets the highlight blocks or Siakam, any of these players. But he seems to change so many shots when he's in the paint because he's so strong, he's sturdy, and he knows where to be. We kind of talked about it with Jakob Poeltl last season. He was a guy that kind of knew where to be, but he was very thin and, did make rookie mistakes. Gasol has that, but is also a thick, experienced player. And he also takes charges in the paint as well, which is a very underrated skill. Him and Kyle Lowry taking charges in the playoffs is going to be certainly a great sight to see. But, we've kind of been talking up Marc Gasol a lot. But the one underwhelming thing that we've had with Marc Gasol coming on the roster, he's only averaging 9 points per game. 9 points per game with the team. His rebounding and stuff and assists are still pretty solid. Six rebounds per game, 4 assists, and he hasn't necessarily started a bunch of games, so his minutes have been down from Memphis. But this guy was averaging 16 points per game in Memphis. He was getting a couple threes a game. We want to see Marc Gasol be more aggressive on the offensive end, and it's a skill, and it's something he's been better at over the past couple games. So it's in the right trajectory for Marc Gasol in terms of being a scorer, but we need him to be more aggressive because we've already talked about to death about how he improves the team defensively, offensively. He gets the best out of all the players around him, but to really assure that this was definitely the move to make, especially where Jonas Valanciunas is almost 10 years younger. He really needs to establish himself as a consistent scoring threat for the Toronto Raptors.
While he was on Memphis, he was averaging about 13 field goals attempted per game. And now he's gone down significantly. I'd say he's around 7 to 8 field goals.
He's at 7.5.
There you go. I was exactly on, and I didn't even have the numbers in front of me. That's exactly what it looked like. And what's concerning is a lot of the games that he wasn't scoring at a high rate as well he was also shooting a poor field goal percentage. 2 for 6, 1 for 5, 1 for 6, 3 for 7. And especially in games against good teams. So that was the big concern, as we were kind of seeing him disappear, right? But that's on top of him not really seeming to be aggressive. But I think a lot of that comes from, if you're not getting a lot of shots up, then really the shot selection that you're looking for is few and far between.
Mm-hmm.
So if we can see him increase his field goals attempted per game, get him around 10, 11, I think that'd be a comfortable number on average. And then some games he's, of course, going to take more.
Yep.
Then we're going to see his confidence come up. We're going to see his field goal percentage probably rise. The one thing, though, about Marc Gasol is that this season he's had 22 games, and this stretches back into his Memphis time as well, where he's scored only 0 to 9 points, which is double the amount that Jonas or Serge Ibaka have had all season. So really, we've expected him to be a shooter when really we do need to factor in that because of the nature of his all-around game, his assisting, his facilitation, his defensive play, we have traded away a guy that's looking to score first to a guy that's not going to be, he's going to be more passive when it comes to scoring.
Yeah.
Right? So that's the trade-off.
Yeah, for sure. And in context of this Raptors team, because you can make the argument on most rosters, you'd rather the guy that can get you more buckets rather than do the other things. But we have Kawhi Leonard, we have Pascal Siakam, we have Kyle Lowry, we have Danny Green, who just went off for a crazy night. Fred VanVleet's been on fire. Serge Ibaka's been a monster scorer down the paint all season long. We have a lot of guys that consistently be relied upon to put the ball in the hoop. And I think Marc Gasol can be relied upon to do it in some context when you really run the offense through him, but we don't necessarily need him to go out there and take the 15 shots that Jonas is taking in Memphis right now. Right? We need him to do the little things, but to be more of a threat, I think that would make the most out of this deal for the Toronto Raptors.
But in certain matchups in the playoffs, I think you do want him to be a guy that takes more shots than Danny Green. Well, maybe not Danny Green because you want him to take threes, but maybe more than Kyle Lowry or maybe more than Pascal Siakam in a matchup such as Boston if they were to play them in the playoffs. I doubt they will. Or in a game or in a series like Milwaukee where really you're going to see with that team having so much length, I think that their weakest defensive position would be Brook Lopez, right? So I'd almost like to see Marc Gasol become one of the top field goal one of the top shooters on the team.
Or even against the Sixers, because Joel Embiid is obviously known as being a phenomenal defender, but he's going to have a lot riding on him most of the game for the Philadelphia 76ers, so we've seen him get gassed in the past, so maybe we could see Marc Gasol.
I'd see Pascal Siakam being used more in a 76ers matchup than Marc Gasol, but I think especially in like a Bucks matchup or even a Boston Celtics if they happen to play them, but it really depends. For right now, you're right. Marc Gasol can be the fourth option or fifth option as long as he's providing everything else on the court.
Certainly, and the one question I want to throw at you, right? Is he capable of being upping his scoring if you give him more attempts in a specific playoff matchup? You mentioned Brook Lopez. Do you think he's capable of going back to that Marc Gasol, only a couple seasons ago was he averaging 17 points per game, 19 points per game. Do you think he's capable for maybe a playoff series to put in big numbers if we run the offense through him, exploiting matchups? Or do you think this is the best that we can get out of Marc Gasol in context of this roster? 10 point, 12 point per game score and doing all the little things.
Well, I'm just looking at, again, the same thing that I said for Jeremy Lin. Really the best indication is the most recent things that you can look at. And with Marc Gasol, there was a stretch where he had a lot of double-digit games, but he still wasn't shooting at a very high rate. I think you're going to see Marc Gasol's consistency on the offensive end just drop now because of his age, because of where he is as a player. I wouldn't look to rely on him in the playoffs. I'd look to rely on other guys, but if you can have a matchup where he can do well, again, like against Brook Lopez, I would hope that he could perform well, but if you're putting him against Joel Embiid, I wouldn't expect him to be the scorer every night. I don't know. What do you think? That's
a fair point. I think we could certainly rely upon him to get maybe 15, 16 points per game, especially in the playoff setting. The grit and grind player, everything slows down. Marc Gasol, I think, is going to be capable of getting buckets. And one very intriguing thing about his tenure with the Toronto Raptors as well, his three-point percentage has quietly been absolutely amazing. He's shooting 41% from the three-point line. Now, his three-point attempts have been cut in half. He's taking about 2 a game, but that's an intriguing thing there. Maybe we'd see his volume go up. His percentage might decrease a little bit, but that's something very intriguing there. Ryker, before we end off this pod, right, because we've kind of been neglecting one other, CJ Miles was a guy that really struggled for the Raptors, so getting rid of him, obviously he's thrived in Memphis before he was injured, so I love to see CJ doing great, but he was a negative on the Toronto Raptors, so getting rid of him wasn't a big issue. But DeLon Wright, he's a player that was a young guy for the Toronto Raptors. He's one of the older young guys, so to speak, but he's in a contract year. He was having a solid season for Toronto, a bit underwhelming. We weren't super hyped with the jump he made as a Toronto Raptor, but in Memphis, he stepped up his game. He's averaging 11 points per game, 4 assists, 4 rebounds, almost 5 rebounds. He's been very impressive down there. I just want to say something about him first. He was a guy that wanted more of a role. He's in a contract year. There's rumors that he might have requested a trade, with some of his social media things saying that he's not an 11th guy. So I think DeLon Wright, it just made sense to move him. I don't think we were going to re-sign him in the offseason. And, was he really going to be in the playoff rotation with how he was playing for the Toronto Raptors?
No, he wasn't going to be. And I look back on this trade and think, I'm sad that Jonas is gone, because if we were to allow him, or if it somehow happened, we said this, it wouldn't have happened, but if it somehow happened that a rotation could allow him to be the player that he is right now in Memphis, that would have been a really sweet thing for that to happen in Toronto. But even what DeLon is bringing right now, it's still less than what the potential of Fred VanVleet is and what Fred VanVleet has delivered. So it's only a positive. Even if DeLon Wright excels, and I don't wish him any bad, I think that it's only a positive thing. And even if he succeeds, I'm thinking it's great that we freed up the space for Fred VanVleet to be the guy now.
Certainly. And yeah, you mentioned it. He was only averaging 7 points per game for the Raptors on not necessarily the greatest shooting, not the greatest 3-point shooting either. So he wasn't really, I didn't see a spot for him to really fit with this Toronto Raptors. Maybe in the playoffs, he'd be fighting with Norm and McCaw and Lynn and all these players. So DeLon Wright, he deserves to thrive, get his opportunity in Memphis. He wasn't, in the same case for Jonas to a lesser extent. These guys weren't going to be as much of impact players in Toronto as much as Marc Gasol is going to be. So I think this trade worked out for both teams, but let us know what you guys think in the comment section below. We certainly know this is going to be a controversial podcast considering how the comment sections have played out over our past few videos. So let us know, was this trade smart? Should we have given up on Jonas Valanciunas? The one maybe point in Jonas's favor is that he's a lot younger, so in the future we would have had him, but I'm happy with the move. Riker, you seem to be happy with the move. Let us know. Check out the Twitter, the Instagram, all that cool stuff. Any last words, Riker?
Yeah, well, we forgot to mention the old podcast on the other platforms, but you know what? If it's up by then, we'll link it, and we're going to start plugging it on everything anyway, so you'll hear about it. And then other than that, that's it for me.
All right, rock out.
Cheers.